About a year ago, I was introduced to a very strange product called Methylene Blue, which is actually a clothing dye. I know that sounds weird, but I'm going to explain. And I was extremely skeptical to try it, but I went ahead, gave it a go. And well, let me tell you, ladies, it has quickly become my number one favorite supplement that I've ever taken. It's like that great for me. And since
Love it.
then, I've tried I've tried all different kinds. I've tried methylene blue skincare, I've tried, drops, I've tried troches, I've tried all these different things. Anyways, I was introduced to troche form of methylene blue by my friend Danielle Hamilton last winter, and it was so funny because you would think that we had like a narcotic on our hands because the way we talked about it. Like she was not willing to share her troches because she was like coveting them because she only had a couple and she was like, oh well, like she did not want to share with me. So then I was determined to get my own troches. And lo and behold, this company can't sell to Canada. And we went on this big adventure of trying to get what's called Troscriptions up to me in Canada. And we literally had to smuggle them in so that Karen could finally try these coveted methylene blue troches. So, with us today is one of the founders of the company, Dr. Scott Sherr. Dr. Scott is a board certified internal medicine physician certified to practice health optimization medicine and a specialist in hyperbaric oxygen therapy. He is the COO of Troscriptions, a line of physician formulated, pharmaceutical grade, and precision dosed buccal troches containing novel ingredients like methylene blue, I'm not going to say these right, agarin, and others in formulas for energy, focus, sleep, stress, immune support, and more. His clinical practice includes health optimization medicine as its foundation, plus an integrative approach to hyperbaric oxygen therapy that includes cutting edge and dynamic HBOT protocols, comprehensive laboratory testing, targeted supplementation, personal practices, synergistic technologies, new and ancient, and more. So I'm really excited to dive into all things of my newest favorite supplement, methylene blue, with you, Dr. Scott. And so welcome to the show.
Well, thanks so much for having me, Karen. That sounds like quite the adventure bringing methylene blue over the border. And I think it's worth it, right? I mean, it's an amazing
It
compound.
is.
It's been around a long time. Just the energy and resilience. And I know we'll talk all about the amazing things about methylene blue, but it's not something that's easy to get in Canada. I know that it's a
Mm-mm.
prescribed compound in Canada only. Here in the United States, you can get it online. You can get it from Amazon, for example, but I never recommend getting any supplements from Amazon ever because you never know if they're actually really what you're going to get. There's been tons of stories of counterfeit products over the years. And with methylene blue specifically, it's very difficult to get clean methylene blue. And what I mean by that, that during the manufacturing process of making it, it's often contaminated with lead, mercury, cadmium, and arsenic. Those are not awesome for anybody's hormones or anybody's cellular metabolism or anything else in between. So USP is the pharmaceutical grade, which you should look for at least. But
Okay.
most of these companies won't even give you like a purity and potency test to know exactly what you got in there. So be super careful. And this is why it took us another 9 months to actually launch our company back in 2019, 2020 to find a good source of methylene blue. And we've had to
Ah,
throw out thousands of dollars worth of it over the years because it didn't meet our spec. So, um, it,
wow.
you can buy it online directly. You can buy it from us at Troscriptions. We do all that testing, of course. I'm a physician, as you said, and I have a number of docs on my team. But you can also get it prescribed at a pharmacy if you have an emergency indication. You can also get it in the hospital as well, and that's where I first learned about it. In that context, and also in chemistry lab, because we use methylene blue as a stain, as something that can actually concentrate in parts of your cells called your mitochondria to look at them under a microscope. So there you go.
Well, I was going to ask you how did you come across methylene blue and why did you get obsessed with it?
Yeah.
But yeah. So is that how? Is this through chemistry class?
Well, I think it was kind of in the reverse in the sense that I work with a very, very brilliant individual. His name's Dr. Ted Achacoso, and Dr. Ted's the founder of Troscriptions. He's also the founder of our nonprofit. It's called Health Optimization Medicine and Practice Association, or Home Hope for short. And Dr. Ted is one of those people that you meet, and there are very few people, probably like 1 in 8 billion by probabilities, that you would meet like him from an IQ perspective only, with an
Oh,
IQ of over 16 standard deviations above the mean. So ridiculously high. And so he's also a
yeah.
physician. He's a pharmacologist. He's got lots of different things that he's done: neuroradiology, anti-aging. The list is forever. But he was doing research when we were first starting the company and saw a number of things that are happening, and it's still happening now that were happening at the time, on research using methylene blue as a mitochondrial support. And so that's how we got really interested in it. I mean, I first learned about it when I was back in, I think, undergrad at UCLA, and we were using it in chemistry lab to stain various parts of the cell. And at the time, I didn't realize that it was really significantly correlated here, because what methylene blue does is concentrates in our cells in the part of our cell called the mitochondria, where we make energy. So I think I learned about it a long time ago, but as a mitochondrial optimizer, as an anti-infective, as having significant potential to help so many people, that was only maybe about 5 or 6 years ago when I first learned about it.
I was at my hairdresser's yesterday, and she discovered methylene blue thanks to me a few months ago, and she was ordering it online, and I was like, don't order it like that. Like, don't be all willy-nilly about it, because, and I told her, I said, I think that some of them contain heavy metals, and I'm like, you
Yes.
can't trust things on, like, you got to make sure that it's got
Yes.
third-party verification and like USP grade or whatever. But it's, and she was like, oh, and I'm like, yeah, don't just go start swallowing this stuff. Like, you gotta be
Yeah.
careful.
Yeah. Yeah. In the beginning of the pandemic, about 6 months in or so, there was a great clickbait headline about our company. It was biohackers using fish tank cleaner to reverse their age. And it was great, fantastic headline. And
Yeah.
this has got a grain of truth in it, like any good clickbait that's wrong, which is that methylene blue is used in fish tank cleaners, and it's been used that way since the 1950s, actually. And what methylene blue can do is help actually treat infections of the fish that are in the aquarium. And that is also true. However, the fish tank aquarium methylene blue sources are going to be the ones that are going to be the most contaminated overall,
Right.
compared to the ones that you'll find even in chemistry lab, for example. So you don't want to be drinking fish tank cleaner. This is absolutely true. However, if you get a good source, a purity potency tested source, then you can have fantastic potential, like in so many ways, which I'm sure we'll talk about, to kind of
Yeah.
support the system, recover, optimize, treat infections, and a lot more.
So where, like, I don't even know the history. Like, why, how did somebody discover this dye? Because it's been around for a super long time, hasn't it?
Yeah, so in the mid 1800s,
I was
it
going
was
to say
developed as
1800s. That's
a
crazy.
dye for blue jeans, as you were describing in your intro, right? So it was a dye that was used to dye blue jeans blue. And somehow, maybe they took a whole bunch of psychedelics in like the desert in South Africa. I have no idea. But they realized that high doses of this compound worked like a what they called at the time a magic bullet, in the sense that they were trying to find a way to treat malaria. Found that methylene blue could treat malaria. The cool thing about this is that it was given the term magic bullet because even at very, very high doses of methylene blue, you would kill the malaria organism, but you wouldn't harm any normal cells in the body. So that was kind of like your kind of your pinnacle of a drug, which was something that didn't harm human cells, but did harm pathogens. And so malaria was a very difficult bug. And methylene blue was developed as the first drug registered with our FDA in the United States in 1897 as a treatment for malaria. And over the next 50 years or so, it was really the only prescribed or only available antimicrobial around. And it was used for urinary tract infections. It was used for chronic wounds. It was used for fungal infections. It was used for multiple different types of things. And it worked really, really well. And so well that if you were in World War II as a pilot, or you were going over to the Pacific Theater and you were going in the jungles over there, you were always having to take prophylactic methylene blue to prevent those kinds of infections. And there were even songs that were sung about taking methylene blue, because as you know, Karen, and those that are listening will know if they haven't known so far, if they try it, is that methylene blue concentrates in your urine. So you
Mhm.
urinate blue at
Mhm.
extremely high doses, like over 3 milligrams per kilogram. So very, very high doses. That's when you start seeing blue in other types of secretions and all different types of waste products that we make, like your poop, but that's only very, very, very high doses. So even so, but these smaller doses would concentrate in the urine. So they make all these stories about peeing blue while they were fighting wars and things like that. So it has a pretty storied history in that capacity, and really mostly used as an anti-infective until about the 1950s, when actual prescribed antimicrobials, the ones that developed out of penicillin, became available. And so that's when we have these better drugs now that
Mhm.
don't make your urine blue. So we're going to give you those
That
instead.
destroy
But
your gut.
indeed, right? And so, but this is the beautiful thing about methylene blue, is that even now we can use it as an anti-infective, because unlike a lot of those other antibiotics that have come around, there's no resistance patterns that have ever been described to methylene blue itself when it comes to treating some of these organisms that it treated back then. And now that we know it has activity against viruses as well, it's been shown to
Mhm.
have activity against even COVID or
Mhm.
Zika. Remember Zika virus, that other one, and other types of viral infections like EBV as well. So there's an opportunity to use it as an antiviral still. However, now we know, over since the 1990s or so, maybe a little bit before that, we now know that it's not only just improving anti-infection control, but has significant impact on mitochondrial function as well. And in between that, we also know, like in the 1950s, actually, just to kind of finish up the story from a timeline. So you had 1897, then you had 1950s, and then you had it kind of fall by the wayside as an antimicrobial. But the first antipsychotics were actually derived from methylene blue, because methylene blue has this property that's called being a monoamine oxidase inhibitor, MAOI. And what that means is that it increases norepinephrine, serotonin, dopamine in the brain. And as a result of that, most people that take methylene blue will feel like a mood boost as a result of it, because they get these neurotransmitters that make you feel good. So the first antipsychotics were actually derived from methylene blue, something called chlorpromazine, and they would actually compound some of these antipsychotics with methylene blue together so that they could make sure that people were taking their antipsychotics at some of these places where they had, like, asylums and things like that back in that
Mhm.
time frame. So if they were taking their psych drugs, their urine would turn blue, right? But if they
Right.
weren't, if they were throwing in the garbage or something, they would not. So it became that piece is there. And then the final timeline, which, as I was kind of alluding to, is you have the use in chemical analysis, using chemical stains, and in chemistry lab, as I was using in medical school. And then finally, this big bucket of how it was working in the mitochondria, which is where we got a lot of our obviously significant interest as we were looking to develop the company and making products in the space that we were in, to try to help people right now while they're on the longer path to optimizing their health.
And I know, Scott, that you guys are all about safety and purity. And, the last thing you want to do is harm anybody. And methylene blue is freakish. Like, it's when I first heard about it, I was like, I'm not taking this shit. Like, your pee turned bright, bright blue. And just looking at it, it's just this it's a blue dye. So and you think back to all of, like, red number 7 dye, or what, all those dyes that
Sure.
became like, ooh, we don't want
Yellow,
to go
red.
near
Yep.
these dyes because it's going to, screw it, make you have ADD or ADHD for kids. And so I almost associated it with that. Like, this is like a weird chemical that is bright blue. It's a clothing dye. I like, how is this not poisonous to my system? And so it made me nervous. Uh, but so coming from you, it makes me feel so much
Yeah.
better. So is it completely safe, Scott? Besides, yeah, I mean, there is that caveat of the serotonin thing, which I want to talk about, because if you're on
Yeah.
an
Yeah.
antidepressant, you shouldn't be taking them, right?
Well, there's actually nuance there too, which we
Okay.
can talk about. So I completely understand and can empathize. I grew up the son of a chiropractor. Okay. There was nothing in my house that was ever synthetic or that didn't come from the earth. But my father, who's still a chiropractor now, very much knows that there is a need for every tool in the toolbox, because we do not live in a natural world. ladies and gentlemen, right? We
Thank
live
you.
in a synthetic environment with synthetic things all around us all the time. And of course, not everything that comes from the ground is safe for us to
No.
consume. I saw plenty of people in medical school die of liver failure because they went foraging for the wrong mushrooms, for example. So these things are
Wow.
common not only in the natural world, but also, of course, and of course, the synthetic world. So I completely understand that worry. I think the key with methylene blue, yes, it is just shockingly blue color. There's no doubt about it. And it is something that does not look natural. And the honest thing is it is not natural. This is a
Mhm.
synthetic dye that was created. It was not something that came from the ground. Okay. So that piece of it is something that some people listening will just have to get comfortable with, knowing that not everything we can do in life can be as natural as we want it to be, and that not everything that comes from the ground is safe for us to consume either. Okay. So when it comes to the safety of methylene blue itself as a compound, there are a lot of things to talk about here, but in general, it is very, very safe. It's been studied for over 150 years now in all different types of populations, except for pregnant women and breastfeeding women. So, in those two categories, it's not something that you want to take because there may be some risks to the baby or to the breastfeeding baby. Probably low risk, but at the same time, we say that you should not be taking methylene blue in those cases. Okay, and if you are obviously sensitive to this class of dyes, which is pretty unusual, you don't want to take methylene blue. It's called a thiazine dye. You probably would know that if you are already, but again, rare. The other aspect that you were alluding to is that because methylene blue works a little bit like it increases those neurotransmitters, especially serotonin, you have to be thinking about what other medications you might be taking. If they increase serotonin already, if they increase dopamine already, or norepinephrine, you might see that there can be a interaction there. But typically, if you're taking very, very low doses of methylene blue, it's not usually an issue. We just usually have people work with their providers to work on titrating the dose very slowly. The only studies that have shown any major issues with the serotonin thing have been the use of IV methylene blue at very, very high doses, along with very high doses of your antidepressants, your SSRIs or SNRIs. So if you're not using IV methylene blue, which I don't think most people need, but we can talk about maybe some of the cases where that would be helpful. If you're not using IV, I don't really think you have to really worry about it too much. But what I would say is that if you are on an SSRI, an SNRI, excuse me, or you're on like a Parkinson's drug, for example, that increases dopamine, or you're taking selegiline or some of these others, then I would have you work very closely with your provider to make sure that you're doing okay and that you're, being supported along the way. But in those are really the major things. In general, what happens when people take methylene blue is that it's working in the mitochondria, right? And we can talk about all those
Mhm.
mechanisms if you like. But as we are compensating, enhancing, improving energy production, detoxification, some people will have symptoms as you are doing that because you don't have a lot of capacity to make energy, or your capacity to make energy is somehow compromised. We're going to give you more that may be symptomatic initially. If we're giving you more detoxification capacity, that may be more symptomatic initially. So your detox kinds of symptoms may be common as you're starting methylene blue, but not for everybody. But this is more for people that have had more chronic complex medical things going on for a while. They have chronic inflammation, they have mitochondrial dysfunction. Methylene blue is fantastic in these populations. It truly is. But the key, and I think this is really where I emphasize so much, is that if you have a chronic issue, something that you, or like a long term goal, for example, you want to start off with lower doses, very, very low doses, and then titrate your dose over time. You don't
Mhm.
want to start off and hammer yourself with like a milligram per kilogram or 50, 70, 150 milligrams of methylene blue at a time. That likely will not go well if you're going for a chronic issue. If you have a acute issue, if you have something like an acute infection, acute trauma, acute low oxygen state, acute hypoxic state, then these higher doses can be very, very beneficial, actually. And so you can use them in kind of that way. But in general, you want to titrate your dose slowly and do it over time, just to make sure that you kind of get to the dose that you need without overdoing it and causing too many symptoms that while you're on that process.
Okay, good to know because it's just thrown out there, and then you go online and it's just like, here you go, take this. And I know that there was these nuances to it. And so I try to tell people that before when I'm pumping it up because I talk about it so much. I'm like,
Yeah, yeah.
you got to be careful. You got to watch, if you're on serotonin in, reuptake inhibitors, then you have to be careful because you could get serotonin syndrome, I think it's called.
It's extremely, extremely rare.
Extremely rare.
There's
Okay,
any
good.
practitioners that are listening that have ever worked in a hospital, they've probably never seen it. And if they
Okay.
have, it probably even wasn't serotonin syndrome. Now, that doesn't
Okay.
mean we don't want to be careful, right? So,
Yep.
as I was saying, that if you're already taking serotonergic drugs, then you should work with a provider to go slowly with your dosing. But in general, what I always say is that it's a low titration and slow titration. And then as soon what people will find is, most people don't realize that most serotonin is actually not produced in the brain. It's actually produced in the gut. And it's
Mhm.
about 99% of your serotonin is produced there. And so if you increase the ability to have more serotonin in the system, that's where people may have some symptoms because they're going to have more serotonin in their gut as well. But I have to say though, Karen, I have a number of, so we have a lot of practitioners that work with our products. We have a consumer product called Just Blue, which is 16 milligrams of methylene blue. And we have a practitioner only product that's called Tro Plus Blue, which is 50 milligrams, 50. And so the practitioner one is only available to practitioners, or if you're working with or in conjunction with a practitioner. We do have a list
That's
of
my next
practitioners.
smuggle, Scott.
Yeah, well, it's great to have it. So I have all of my patients have the higher doses in their emergency cabinets just in case something happens. They get an acute infection, God forbid they have a
COVID.
stroke or like a brain injury or something like that. They can use it at these higher doses to support mitochondrial function. But what I always say to the people that are thinking about using methylene blue is that like, if you're going to use these high doses, you really should be under practitioner guidance. Is my strong opinion. But these lower doses, a lot of the people that are in our practitioner network are actually using methylene blue to titrate their patients off of things like SSRIs
I
and
was going to ask
SNRIs.
that.
Yeah, because there's some studies looking at these lower doses, 8 to 16 milligrams in depression, in bipolar. Now, again, I don't recommend you stop any of your medications.
No.
This is not personalized medical advice, okay?
Mhm.
But there are people that are doing this. And the reason for that is because it works and increases some of those neurotransmitters and helping the brain kind of rebalance itself in that way, but not just that way. And I think the crux of it, and I think we should go through it if you're ready, which is, how is it actually working in the mitochondria? Because most people that have depression, that have neurodegenerative disease, that have bipolar, they have significant mitochondrial dysfunction. And we can do something about that using this particular compound. And I think that's really where it becomes so powerful.
There's so many things that impact mitochondrial health. And so for those that don't know, mitochondria, you can think of it as the battery within the cell, the energy within your cell. We have most concentrated in the brain, correct?
So, no, oh, this is a
Oh,
good one for you. So, I'm going to give you a little quiz question. All right.
okay.
So, I'm going to give you multiple choice. It's going to be
Oh,
fun. We're going to have your listeners
the
listening to it
heart.
here. Okay. So, where do we think we have the most mitochondria in our body? Okay. Is it A, your brain? Is it B, your heart? Is it C, your ovaries? Or is it D, your musculoskeletal cells?
I've heard somebody talk about this. I don't think it's the ovaries, but it'd be so cool if it was.
It is. It
Shut
is.
up. How do I not
Yes.
know
So your
this? That's
ovaries
terrible.
and your testicles, your sperm, have the most mitochondria per cell. Why? Right? Being growing a baby or creating a baby on the male side takes a huge amount of energy. So those sperm have to travel a long distance, a long distance to get to where they need to go. And an ovary, an egg, has to create a baby, right? So this is a huge.
Right.
So one of the reasons why we have such significant fertility issues now is because of everybody says, oh, the toxins in the environment, medications we're taking, stress, blah, blah, blah. But what all this is doing is affecting mitochondrial function. So we've had tons of people report over the years that they've gotten pregnant after using methylene blue. And that's the reason is that it's working on mitochondrial function. So you have tons of them in your ovaries and your sperm. So your eggs and your sperm. You have tons in your brain. So if your brain's not working well, what do you feel? Concentration problems, brain fog, difficulty with attention and focus, memory. These are related to mitochondrial dysfunction oftentimes. And so that's for sure happening. And then if you have exercise induced fatigue, so you work out, you exercise, but you get really tired, or like I have a lot of patients that will say, especially when they're very sick, that they'll exercise and then for like 3 days they can't get out of bed. That is severe mitochondrial dysfunction related
Yeah.
to your mitochondria not working well in your skeletal muscle, because they have to have a huge amount of reserve so that you can run away from a predator if needed. If you, back in Africa when, or wherever you believe, we needed to run very far from animals, and we weren't just preying them, but we were also, we weren't only just predators, we were also prey at that time too. So
So it's like we have to keep going upstream. Like we typically box everything into like these sections of like, okay, you've got heavy metals, you've got mold, you've got parasites, but all of these things are affecting your mitochondria. So
yes,
is that like so we have to start up there? Is that where we start with the detoxification process is at the mitochondrial level?
I am glad you asked, because Troscriptions as a company was developed as a for-profit entity of a nonprofit organization that we developed in 2017 based on Dr. Ted Achacoso, who I mentioned earlier, his practice, which was he called Health Optimization Medicine and Practice, or Home Hope for short. And we created a nonprofit out of his clinical framework that is a 7-module certification course for providers that are looking to understand how to optimize health in their patients and clients rather than just treat disease. And this framework is extremely robust. Of course, many people have heard of functional medicine, looking at the root causes of illness. And I think that's obviously a huge upgrade compared to conventional medicine.
Mm-hmm.
But nobody really looks at how you can keep people healthy, not just how
Mm-hmm.
you can treat people's diseases, even if they're the root cause. And so I have a lot of friends that are functional medicine trained, and I refer them out all the time. But what Home Hope was developed to do was to create a framework to help practitioners optimize the health of their patients from the ground up, looking at cellular metabolism, looking at the mitochondria, looking at toxins, looking at all the exposures that we have. So for me and for for those on my team, because the team at Troscriptions is the same basic team at Home Hope as well, is that's always our framework. That it takes a long time though to optimize somebody's mitochondrial function, their gut, their neurotransmitters. It takes 6 months, a year longer. That's where we found that methylene blue is a fantastic way to help people right now while they're on that longer path to optimizing their mitochondrial function. So addressing all of those buckets that you just described in the framework that we have.
Mm-hmm.
The nice thing about methylene blue, though, is that you can bring it into the situation or to the particular person very early on in that process and start helping them feel better while they're on
Mm-hmm.
that longer path. Because the hardest thing, and I think many people that are listening will know this, is like you get roadblocks, you get defeated sometimes because you
Yeah.
think you're getting better, then all of a sudden you just crash, or you're just getting a little bit better, but there's all these other things, and you want to feel better tomorrow, but your practitioner is like, no, it's gonna take 6 months or a year to see the benefit. So you can bring methylene blue on and work in the mitochondria, this, as you said, the battery or the powerhouse of our cell. Because I mean, the statistics in the United States are kind of shocking. I mean, at least 94 to 96% of the US population, I'm sure Canada's not that far behind, maybe you guys are
No,
slightly healthier,
I doubt
is
it.
has metabolic dysfunction.
Yeah.
And metabolic dysfunction means that you're not making energy very well. And what that also means is that you have mitochondria that are not working at optimal capacity. So the most common reasons to have mitochondrial dysfunction, you just mentioned some of them. So toxins, medications, insulin resistance is actually the biggest one. So if you're a
Mhm.
diabetic or if you have insulin resistance, and that's like 3/4 of the United States population, if you look at those two categories of people, will have some element of mitochondrial dysfunction. And what that means is either or you can't make energy well in those places where you need them, and or you can't detox well from the energy that you make. So when we make energy,
Okay.
it's called ATP, adenosine triphosphate. When we make energy, what happens is that we make waste products like our exhaust. Okay, like if you have a car and you see in the back of your car, you have exhaust coming out. We also make exhaust in our cells. Now, most people know that the major exhaust that we have is something called carbon dioxide, CO2. We also make water, which is part of the byproduct of the reaction. But we also make these things called reactive oxygen species, or free radicals, or oxidative stress. They're all the same term or different terms for the same process. Okay. And we need a little bit of that actually, because that's really important for signaling and
Mhm.
for helping us understand what the body needs. But too much of that makes rust in the system. And so that those gears start rusting, you can't make energy well, the whole system starts shutting down. And our antioxidant levels. So antioxidants are the ones that are supposed to come in there and help neutralize that oxidative stress. So those get depleted over time, things like your glutathione, your vitamin C, your alpha lipoic acid, and others. And so
And
the
genetically
system starts
too,
breaking.
right, Scott? Like
What's that?
genetically, you can be a terrible oxidite or like you have problems with antioxidants, maybe process. I can't remember, but I just know that on my genetic, that was one of my worst ones. Was it was like 100% red when it came to antioxidants or oxidant, like oxidizing. I don't know, like
There are
which.
some people, yeah, there are some people that will make more than others,
Okay,
that make it harder for the
to make more
system.
oxidation.
Yes, they make
Okay,
more oxidation. And
so they
because
need
of
more
various
antioxidant.
aspects, yes, exactly. So as a
Okay,
result of that, you have a need for more antioxidants than the average person as a result of having deficiencies in various ways of making energy or
okay,
in certain pathways that kind of will shift things towards creating more of that oxidative stress than others. So,
okay.
but all of us these days, as we know, people are just getting sicker and
Hmm.
sicker. And there's all these variables that are causing it. But in the end, almost always it's mitochondrial dysfunction that, as a result of that piece, everything else kind of goes south, right? And you start feeling worse. And it may just be like you went off a cliff. You felt good one week, and then all of a sudden things just never recover. It could be an infection. We see a lot, actually, seen a lot of this in the post-COVID world that we're in now. People were,
Yeah.
healthy in quotes, right? But then they got COVID, or they were vaccinated for it, or maybe both, and then they had significant issues post and haven't recovered, right? And so a lot of these people would say, well, I felt fine beforehand, like now I'm just went off a cliff. But oftentimes it's because that cellular machinery was already under duress, it was already under stress. And it was kind of like the final, nail in the coffin, the final
Hmm.
cookie and whatever it is, like the final thing that kind of brought everything over the bucket and caused the symptoms.
Hmm. And detox itself is just so hard on our body. Like when I started heavy metal chelation, my body just completely fell apart. I started rapidly gaining weight from it. I started losing my eyesight, and I was like, "Whoa!" Like this is. And I was on like low doses. I wasn't going too crazy, and I think that that's what I think it was because I wasn't supporting the mitochondria. So, if we could support the mitochondria prior, bump it up and then kind of go into the heavy metal or whatever mold detoxification, line detox, whatever you're doing while taking that mitochondrial support, then I would think that is what we should be doing.
Yes. So the best person that I know on detox, you probably have heard of, maybe you've had him on your podcast, is Dr. Chris Shade.
Yeah,
And Chris Shade from Quicksilver. And
recently.
so,
Yeah.
oh, that's great. Yeah, he did. He was also on our podcast. It's called the Smarter Not Harder podcast. And he did like this 20-minute deep dive into all the aspects of detoxification. So if anybody's interested, I would have them go to your previous podcast with him, or if they're interested in maybe more of like a practitioner focus, because we kind of dive into the biochemistry significantly in mine, then I would encourage you to go there. But it's absolutely important, as you said, to support all stages of detoxification, everything from mitochondrial function to binding toxins to expelling toxins to liver support and everything else in between. But the cool thing, again, is that methylene blue can help with all of those stages. And it can
Right.
be added on as you're going through that detox process, whether it be heavy metals or if it was, medications, if it's other types of toxins, if it's infection. What methylene blue is going to do is help in almost all of those stages, depending on the dose, depending on the need. But that's what makes it so powerful as kind of a utility player in so many ways.
Will it actually help get rid of toxins out of the cell when you're supporting, like, will taking methylene blue, for instance, help with getting rid of heavy metals?
So with heavy metals themselves, what happens is that heavy metals require a detoxification, right? They
Yeah,
require
like a
somehow, so
chelator.
that's exactly. So they need something that's going to help neutralize them. So
Mhm.
we do think that methylene blue can help in this process because
Okay.
methylene blue is has this capacity to neutralize inflammation, neutralize things that are causing a reaction in the system. And at the same time, it increases the number of antioxidants in that you have in capacity. So I think it works in both ways, but we definitely have evidence on both sides. We have more evidence that it increases your body's own natural capacity to make antioxidants, especially at higher doses. But at lower doses, it can act like an antioxidant directly, which is involved in heavy metal detox as well as with infections at the same time.
Okay, good to know. I love it. I love it so much. Oh my gosh. And like everything you're talking about, it's like methylene blue is made for the menopausal woman. Like not only are we the most rich in mitochondria in our ovaries, which I can say now, when we start to lose our estradiol is really important for mitochondrial health.
Yes.
It's also really important for the process of making serotonin. And so women will become depressed. They lose their energy. Our thyroid starts to go down. So mitochondria starts to get affected by it. All of the hormones, and so this is so amazing for all of these things to help support what's going on in menopause.
Right. And I think it's important for those that are listening to say that doesn't take the place of the other things that you need to do or that would be helpful for you to support you through menopause or perimenopause. If you decide on bioidenticals, if you obviously change your diet and have a better
Yes.
overall ecosystem there with your gut, with your neurotransmitters as best as you can, with your hormones as best you can, of course. And so these are all kind of happening underneath the hood. But what
Yes.
I found to be very, very helpful is that again, you add this on as an energy support, as a detoxification support. And we also have another product that's a combination of methylene blue with nicotine, caffeine, and
Oh
CBD.
yeah, we're talking about that.
It's called blue cannatine, and
Yeah.
that's been fantastic for people in this
That was the
particular
one that
category.
Danny wouldn't share. She was like, mm-mm. I was like, what? Give it to me now.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I mean, so the way blue cannatine was developed was actually our first product that we developed, and it was developed to help you focus, be productive, increase your verbal fluidity, and feel like you were on one of those pharmaceutical grade stimulants that you'd have to get prescribed by your doctor. But instead of being that, it was 3 to 5 hours without any come down, without any crash, and without having you to find a drug dealer or or try to convince your friend to give you a couple uh, in between college classes or something. That didn't exist when I was there in college. Like people weren't taking like Adderall and those other drugs. But but we have a lot of students that are using blue cannatine and a lot of women, perimenopausal women for the reason you just mentioned, the brain fog, the sleeplessness, and having to work the next day and whatever, because it's a fantastic way to support the system. But the reason why we combined those four ingredients is that we wanted to support the system, not just stimulate the system. Of course, everybody knows
Mm,
caffeine already. Caffeine's a fantastic and the most widely used nootropic in the world. Then you have nicotine, which is also widely used, but mostly as in a tobacco product or in a vaping product. You don't want to smoke, you don't want to vape nicotine because nicotine is addictive, but it's more addictive if you vape or smoke it because it has additives in those products. Your additives in the cigarettes, additives in the vaping products, and also the nicotine in a cigarette's like 26 milligrams. In a vaping product, it's like 25 to 50 milligrams per hit. Where we have in a troche form, it's just 1 milligram in the full troche, and the average dose is about a half of that, per person when they're taking it for this feeling of like feeling like they're on one of these, pharmaceutical stimulants, but without the come down and crash at the end. So we used very, very low dose, but nicotine at these doses is anti-inflammatory. It improves cognition, memory, verbal fluidity, and it is very, very safe as well. So, but it
yeah.
is stimulating the system.
Yeah.
And so we wanted to have these two stimulants in conjunction with something like methylene blue, which was supporting your ability to make energy, but also supporting your ability to detox as well. And then, of course, you have CBD in there, and CBD is a fantastic way to decrease inflammation, make you feel a little bit better. It increases a neurotransmitter called anandamide, which makes you feel a little bit more blissful. Ananda is bliss in Sanskrit and things like that. But it all came out of the idea, though, that methylene blue would be this great energy supportive and that we could kind of build on top of that using this particular synergy of ingredients at very low doses.
Yeah, it's my favorite, I have to say. And just so everybody knows, so what I've gotten from methylene blue, number one is that brain clarity and clean energy. It's not, I'm very sensitive to other things like caffeine and whatever, all the other stuff that's out there right now. I can't go near it. I can have one cup of coffee and that's the end of it. So it for me, it was just it's this instant brain clarity. And when you add in the nicotine, it's just takes it to the next level. I love taking it before I have a talk to do. Every time I have podcasts or interviews in the day, I take it because I feel like I'm a lot sharper. It's just like my brain goes, "Bing." And so it's great for workouts and stuff too, but I mostly use it for the purpose of brain function and brain clarity because it feels so good. It just lights up my brain. If I'm traveling, I like it because I get severe jet lag and I don't sleep well and I have to take prescription sleep medications when I travel or won't sleep at all. And so I am always in this like brain fog that's so bad. And so I always carry methylene blue with me now and the cantine blue, and I'll use those while I'm away every single day so that I can just get rid of that fog as soon as I wake up. Because if not, I'll have it throughout the whole day. And so it's like an instant boom, it's gone. And so I'm so grateful to have something that will do that because coffee doesn't.
I'm with you. And I love your description of it because that's one we use a lot, which is clean energy. You don't, if you take
Clean.
methylene blue by itself, you feel this sort of clean energy. You don't feel stimulated.
No,
Many people actually don't like that stimulated feeling. Some people love it, but some people don't
I
like that. And
don't.
they just want to have more energy, more focus, more capacity, more creativity, but without feeling like they're just kind of like jittery and overstimulated. And with methylene blue, because it's so supportive to the system, you can really feel that clean energy. And you use it for, as you described, for focus, for work, for travel. We have others that use it for endurance as well. And the cool thing about that is that what methylene blue does, it can act just like oxygen in your cells. So what that means is that you need oxygen to help make you energy. And if there's less oxygen around, you can't make as much energy. So if you are an endurance athlete and you're going very far, you're going to run out of oxygen at some point where you can't get enough to your tissues and things are going to start making you slow down. But having more capacity, methylene blue actually gives you that more capacity. So I just actually worked with a marathon, ultra marathoner guy just recently. He just finished the Leadville race, which is here in Colorado. This is the toughest 100-mile race in the country because it's up. I think it starts at, I think, 9,000 feet elevation, and then it goes up to about 12,000 during parts of the race. And so I
Mm.
had him taking, and I've done this protocol with a couple of people. They were taking blue cannatine and two just blue every 4 hours for the
Oh,
entire race.
wow.
And he got 3 hours shaved off of his time versus
No.
the previous year. Yeah. And that's, I mean, it's 100 miles, right? So this is a huge
Yeah,
race. You're not going to
that's
see
huge.
3 hours if it's, 26-mile
Right.
marathon. But we've had people significantly cut down their race times because of using the combination here, because you're getting more bump on that energy capacity level. And then people don't realize that nicotine actually is an anti-inflammatory as well. So nicotine is a stimulator, but it's also something that's being studied in things like long COVID and chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia and chronic viral infection because it actually decreases brain inflammation. So
Wow.
I use that oftentimes during these kind of big events because that combination seems to be really, really effective. And one other thing I should also mention on the jet lag side of things is that when you're on an airplane, you're pressurized to about 8,000 feet above sea level. So that means you're getting about 13 to 14% oxygen in, as opposed to if you're at sea level, you get 21% oxygen in the air that you breathe. So you're getting significant hypoxia on a plane. And as a result of that, you're getting less capacity to make energy, just like we were describing with endurance and marathons and things like that. So with methylene blue around, you can actually prevent some of that damage that happens because you have less oxygen around. In
Okay.
addition, methylene blue also protects from the ionizing radiation of being that far up in an airplane as well. So you have the capacity of, protecting your cells more from ionizing radiation. You can make more energy than you would when you're at altitude. So I live in Colorado. So if people are coming to visit me, I always give them a pack of our Just Blue as they. I try to have them to have it
Immediately.
before they get here. But if they
Yeah.
don't, they'll come see me. I'll give them the methylene blue so they can start taking it. And actually, we have a full jet lag protocol that's on our website at Troscriptions. If you just search in our search bar for jet lag, you'll see an entire
I haven't seen
article, a
that.
blog.
Okay.
Yeah, on the bottom of that is a nice little infogram, diagram, whatever they're called,
Mm-hmm.
infographic. That's it, where you can
Infographic.
see kind of the way that we do it. It seems like actually a lot of methylene blue when you first look at it, and it is. So we don't recommend like the first time you try methylene blue, you try it at these
Right. Yeah.
doses, but it's really good to use, and I use it all the time. I mean, I've had people tell me they've traveled from places like Hawaii and Europe using our protocol, and they have like zero, almost zero jet lag, which is pretty amazing.
Wow.
And then, of course, I mean, you need to work on circadian rhythms, and there's other things that you can do, and we have other products that can help there too. But in general, the methylene blue is so fantastically supportive for just so many different types of people, right? So I'm really glad that you've had that experience, Karen.
Yeah, it does really boost my mood as well, I have to say. Like I do find I'm happier, like it's just more content. Totally have noticed the difference. I don't lean on the side of depression, but I also don't lean on the side of like great happiness either. I'm
Yeah,
kind of one of those like
yeah, that's me.
neutral. And yeah,
Yeah.
okay, so and it just you can tell it is a mood stimulator where you just feel like, oh yeah, I feel good, like I feel happier. It's very interesting.
Yeah.
Uh the the I've heard that the receptors can get saturated with it, like that you should take a break or else you'll lose the benefits. Is that true?
So methylene blue doesn't have a receptor per se.
Yeah.
So methylene blue is a cycler, which means that it can kind of do a whole bunch of things in the body. It can give you energy, it can give you resilience, antioxidant capacity, it can upregulate or increase your own antioxidants. It works as an anti-infective. So I think it depends on what you're using it for, is what it comes down to.
Okay.
So in general, if people are pretty well optimized and they just need it for some extra support, maybe a couple times a week or when they're traveling or when they're doing extra endurance, then you're just kind of taking it periodically overall. But I work with a lot of people, and a lot of people that use our products are people that have been sick for a long time. If you've been
Mhm.
sick for a long time, you've had issues with brain fog, issues with exercise-induced fatigue, issues with chronic musculoskeletal kinds of things, or pain, or just overall inflammation. It takes a while for the body to kind of get better, right? It's not going to be
Mhm.
overnight. That's why our nonprofit and the work we do there is so important. But what I found is that the key is that we make these things and called a buccal troche, as you mentioned in the beginning. Buccal if you're in Canada, but
Bugle.
buccal here in the United States.
Yeah,
And
buckle. I'm
buccal
like,
means
what?
it's all good. Yeah. It goes so the buccal troche is extremely interesting and very
Yeah.
novel. It's a square lozenge that typically goes between your upper cheek and gum and dissolves over about 15 to 30 minutes. Okay. There's a couple of advantages of this. Okay. The first advantage is that because it's up right here, it dissolves pretty fast over about 15 to 30 minutes. So you're going to feel the effects faster. Number one.
Mhm.
Number two is that when you swallow your supplements, your capsules, your food too, it takes a while to get through the system and get processed. And then during that processing, something called first pass metabolism, basically digestion, including your liver, often things will get degraded or become less bioavailable, especially your supplements and your capsules and things like that. So that
Mhm.
is a degradation of the process, and it's much slower overall. So we developed this dosage form called the troche to have those two advantages: be faster and be more bioavailable. The third major benefit is that it's titratable because we have this little scoring on the troches, so you can make them into like a little quarter piece. You can do a half, you can do three quarters, you can do a full. So you can titrate your dose over time. And that's really the key for methylene blue, as I was alluding to earlier, is that especially if you've been having more chronic issues, it's really important to kind of titrate that dose. So start at 4 milligrams and then increase. That's one quarter of one troche of the Just Blue. Then increase every 3 to 5 days until you start seeing a benefit. And so in some of those patients, once I find the benefit, sometimes it's 4, sometimes it's 8, sometimes it's 12, 16, sometimes it's that Tro Plus, that 50 milligrams. Sometimes we even have to
Mhm.
go up depending on the situation. Once you find the dose that works, if it's been a chronic issue, you're going to want to stay on that dose for a period of time, at least several weeks, if not several months, depending
Okay.
on what's going on. Otherwise, that you can help support and help recover at the same time. There's some evidence that methylene blue can help regenerate parts of your mitochondria, which is pretty awesome.
Mhm.
There's some evidence that you can synergize it with things like red light therapy or near infrared light therapy because
Yeah.
it helps synergize together and increase the capacity of this regeneration and also energy production. So that's also true. But in my patients and clients that I work with, if they have chronic issues, then I'm having them on for at least 2 to 4 weeks before I start titrating down either the dosage amount or the dosage frequency, depending on the situation. And the final thing I'll say here is that you probably were all listening that methylene blue is a very shockingly blue color. Okay. So if you dissolve it in your mouth is going to turn blue. Now,
Yeah. And your teeth.
if you want it to work faster, that is still what I recommend. However, if you decide that you don't want a blue mouth, and I completely understand that, the nice thing about methylene blue by itself is that methylene blue is a fantastic bioavailable compound, which means that if you swallow it, it's still going to almost get into the system, just as if you use it as a troche. It's just going to be slower. Okay. So I have a lot of patients that will swallow methylene blue on an empty stomach in the morning and then go about their day. And then sometimes they'll dose it again. So some people will take it, 8 a.m. in the morning and at 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. It doesn't typically make you feel like you can't go to bed. Some people will make you feel like this, but usually it doesn't. For me and for most of my patients, I have them dose it at 8 a.m. and 1 or 2 p.m. if they're going to dose it twice daily.
Mm-hmm.
But you can just swallow it. Okay. So you don't have to worry about a blue mouth. Now, additional caveat is that if you're taking our blue cantine, which is the nicotine, caffeine, CBD, and methylene blue, this one is worth a blue mouth. Okay.
Okay.
Because if you can do the blue mouth, you will feel in about 5 minutes, if you're pretty highly metabolic, to about 15 or 20, you will snap your fingers when you find the right dose, and you will know that you have found the right dose. Believe me, it's not
Yes,
subtle once
I
you find the right
agree.
one.
Yeah. And for me, it's a quarter. Like I can just take a quarter of it
Yeah.
and I put it in my cheek and it's like, oh yeah, like instantaneous brain clarity. Boom, here we go. And I saw on your Instagram actually a woman saying that she drinks matcha green tea afterwards and that it clears out her blue mouth.
Yeah, that's Dr. Isabella Wentz. She's a
Right. Yes.
PharmD. She's
Yeah.
she's very specialized in Hashimoto's and
Yeah.
had her own history, and she's fantastic. She was on our podcast. If you haven't had her on yours, she's great
I
too.
haven't.
And
Yeah.
and she is just a wealth of information. But she's like, yeah, randomly, I was having your methylene blue. I think she uses our Just Blue, and her husband uses it. Her son uses it with her supervision, and she's like, yeah, just a little matcha. It was all gone. I'm like, all gone? She's like, yeah, even my tongue. I was like, so yeah, that's another way. So matcha
That's
works.
crazy.
We also talk about baking soda also works.
Yeah.
Hot liquids work to help get rid of the blue a little bit faster overall. But as we like to say at Troscriptions, blue is the new smart, everybody here. So, flaunt it. This is something that is working for you, show the world, because you got to get them off of these crazy caffeine stimulant binges that you're taking energy drinks 5 times a day. You're smoking cigarettes or you're vaping, which is obviously terrible for you. You are just drinking tons and tons of coffee, which screws up your hormones. And,
Hmm.
perimenopausal
The
women know this as
adrenals.
well. It's probably worse in that category, right? So
Hmm.
I think it's a great product to help cleanly and smoothly help support the system. And then yes, there's a blue mouth, but there are some ways to mitigate, and matcha seems to be one of them. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna try that. My matcha tea is packed away in a box right now because we're moving, and I was like, so I didn't put one. I was gonna put one in. I was like, that well, it's suited. I can have a blue mouth this today while I interview
Yeah. Yeah.
Scott. Like no problem.
Yeah.
And then I was
I
like,
usually
oh,
swallow it.
okay,
So just to give so I mean, I
okay,
swallowed mine today. My dose is usually about 8 milligrams 3 times a week ish on average.
okay,
But
okay.
it depends. Like I just came off from a conference last week. So I was taking 8 milligrams twice daily during the day while I had
Yeah.
my conference. I was speaking as well. So I took some blue cantine right before I had my talk. I also have a number of other things from our company that we use. We have something called troches for sleep, which is fantastic
Yes.
for changing time zones, which I love it. And my patients love it, especially if you're perimenopausal. It has some 5-HT melatonin support, but also works on the GABA system, which is screwed up when you don't have as much progesterone around, as you all
Yep.
know. And I know Karen knows as well. So I use a lot of that. And then I have also another one called Tromune, which is a high strength extract of the cordyceps mushroom. But you use it at night because it increases deep sleep. It's also anti-infective, antimicrobial, and it's immune system boosting. So we've
I
been
haven't
testing
tried that
that, and
one.
that's one of our newer products over the last. Yeah, yeah, we just came out with it in March, but we sold out of it like very shortly, and so we just came back in stock maybe a couple weeks ago with that one. So that's my sleeper, which I mean is that I think that's the one that, along with our low dose Just Blue, like our kind of daily mainstays for me is or regular use is Just Blue on a regular basis and Tromune on a regular basis overall. So
And just quickly, can you explain? It confuses me how it react. Like when you take it internally, How is it then reacting, or what does it do when we hit red light? Do red light therapy with it?
Yeah. So red light donates its energy. So the red light energy, the photon energy, gets donated to part of your mitochondria called complex 4 or cytochrome oxidase. And it donates electrons, which means it helps enhance energy production. It does a whole bunch of other things. It increases nitric oxide, so you have some dilation of blood vessels. The mitochondria start getting revved up. You make more energy. And so I combine red light with a lot of different things overall. But if you take your methylene blue, so if you take it as a troche, don't mind your mouth being blue. In about 15 to 30 minutes, go out in the sunlight or go in front of your red light panel, and you will likely feel an extra lift as a result of that.
Okay.
Now, if you swallow it, totally fine, but you want to wait at least 45 to 60 minutes probably before after you swallow it to go into your sun exposure or to to go in front of your near infrared light panel. So here in Colorado, what I'll do typically, depending on the time of year, is I'll take it, then I'll go out for a walk and have my my daily walk while I have my methylene blue in. So that's the major synergy there. And there was a study that
Okay.
looked at red light and methylene blue for neurodegeneration, so models of Alzheimer's for the most part. And so
Hmm.
there's some really good studies right now that are looking at methylene blue for for cognitive impairment, for Alzheimer's, for neurodegeneration in general. And so very exciting work that's happening. These are like these low doses, and this is we're talking about
Hmm.
like your 4, 8, 16, 25 milligrams maybe tops. And then once you get above about like 50 milligrams or so, that's when you become more stressful to the system a little bit, and also
Okay.
becomes more as an anti-infective and as something that can rescue mitochondrial function if you have an acute trauma ischemia. So this is when I was talking about earlier, where for a lot of my patients, I'll have them have the higher strength in their medicine cabinet. I can give the
Right.
example from my mom, actually. This is maybe a couple months ago now. She was bitten by a tick in New York where she lives, and ticks are just uncool anywhere, but especially there. So I gave her 150 milligrams of methylene blue times one dose, and then I had her take 50 milligrams a day for 4 days afterwards. Now, she still took antibiotics because she wanted to, and that's fine. But I've used I use it in conjunction a lot like this, where you're giving the system a significant amount of more support at these higher doses. And she had it in her medicine cabinet because I convinced her. Actually, no, I think I just left it there one summer when I was visiting back to New York with my family. I'm like, Mom, this is for you. I'll call you when you need it, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
And now
right.
she's like this huge believer. She takes the Just
Of
Blue almost
course.
every day. She takes the blue cantine. She stopped drinking caffeine, and she's loving it. So I think I mean, it's a testament to, I think, the power and the versatility of this particular compound, right? So you have like this lower dose,
Well, I
4,
think
8,
I
16.
took like 1,000. Does that sound right in an IV?
1,000 would be a lot
Okay,
of
maybe not then.
IV.
Maybe not.
I
I
don't
could
think
have
that
that wrong.
much.
Okay, maybe it was 100.
100 would be more likely. Yeah. So,
Okay.
so IV methylene blue, been around a long, long time. We use it in emergency rooms to rescue mitochondrial function or hemoglobin or red blood cells if they're not working very well. Actually, something called methemoglobinemia. It's also something used in cyanide poisoning, which I don't recommend. Nobody should be traveling to Russia as an agent anytime soon. But cyanide's not a good idea because it actually destroys part of your mitochondria. So it's used in that way. I have some providers that I work with that do use IV methylene blue for severe chronic infections, things like
Okay.
Bartonella and Lyme, and I've seen
Hmm.
some really good benefits.
Hmm.
And also in some of these more acute situations like acute strokes and traumatic brain injuries, it's been studied this way. In general, I don't think you need IV because,
Yeah.
again, you can only get IV, once in a while. You can't get it all the time. And also, you do have to be more aware that taking these higher doses IV will go to the brain faster. So if you're taking something like an SSRI, you have to be much more careful. And I also feel that I've just spoken to a lot of people over the years that have taken IV 50, 100 milligrams. Some people feel fantastic, usually if they're pretty well optimized already. But most of the people that I've spoken to have felt terrible after taking that kind of a high dose because, again, going to the brain fast, causing a lot of stimulation very fast, and it can be very difficult for people that have chronic issues
Mhm.
to really tolerate. So my sense is that lower doses are the way to go. Oral, so troche or swallowing, methylene
Mhm.
blue is the way to go. And then titrating the dose slowly until you start to feel better. And
Mhm.
I know that's a very general term. Okay. And so what I would say to my patients is that when you start feeling better, how much better do you feel? Is it like a little bit better? Is it a lot better? Is it like, and then if you just feel a little bit better, then keep going your dose and see how you feel until you're like, wow, this is actually something that's changing my life. I have more energy, I have more capacity. And don't worry about feeling overstimulated because you likely will not. Okay.
No.
What often happens with methylene blue is that some people know kind of in real time, especially women, because they're much more in tune with how they feel and how their bodies work. Men in general don't have a very good reputation for those kinds of things. It's more like, well, how was your day? Did you have as much energy? Did you feel like you needed a nap after lunch? And like, oh yeah, no, I didn't need any of those things. No, I did feel better. Typical guy situation versus girl situation there. But I really do feel like the versatility is huge. It's just a matter of playing around with the dosing and going slow.
Yeah, I'm very intuitive with what I take. And I was thinking about it this morning before we got on our call. And I was like, why do I love it so much? Besides all the benefits that I'm getting, why do I like just, I can't wait to take it. I get excited on the days I get to take it. Because I'm like you, where I don't want to take it every day because I don't want my body to adjust to it. And cost effective also. And just, I just feel like not everything should be taken every day. And it's one of those things. And then that's an intuitive thing where I'm like, I don't feel like I should take it every day. And intuitively, my body wants it and loves it. And there's so many supplements that I'll come across where it has all these amazing benefits and my body just goes hard no. No, you can't take it. And I'm like, damn it. Like, and I have to listen to it because I know if
Yeah.
I don't feel well if I take it. But
Yeah.
methylene blue is like spot on.
I love it. I mean, the intuitive piece is so hard for people, and I
It
think it's
is. It
it's much
is.
much easier for women in general because you
Mhm.
have this complex 4 phase cycle every month that you have to be thinking that's always involved. But if not, methylene blue is not going to be for everybody, that is for sure. I mean, I
Mhm.
also I am kind of describing it as something that could be really helpful for so many people. And that is absolutely true. I found very few people that don't do well with it if you do a titration game, as I've been describing. But it's not going
Mhm.
to be for everybody. And
Mhm.
I do think it doesn't absolutely take the place of doing the things that are going to be the most sustainable for you. Your
Yes. I
diet,
always
your
say that.
lifestyle, your
Yep.
behaviors, your
The
relationships, your
non-negotiables.
the non-negotiables, right? Your hydrations and things. And
Yeah.
so, yes, can I compensate for some of that stuff? With methylene blue for sure, but
Yeah.
it's only going to be a band-aid if you don't do the work. And then the nonprofit we developed, Home Hope, Health Optimization Medicine and Practice, that's the crux of everything that we do at Troscriptions. And we often will say, I often will say, and as a company, we will say, I hope you don't need our products forever. I hope you only need these when you need them because you have extra stress, you have extra need because of fill in the blank. The
Mhm.
truth of the matter is something like methylene blue. Many of us are under stress under a regular amount of time. Most of us are traveling all the time, or we don't sleep very well because we have 4 kids at the house that, thank God, went back to school last week, and then like those kinds of things. And so, like, life is stressful, right? That's how most of us are living. So I think there's a need for methylene blue for many of us on a relatively consistent clip, but certainly
Mhm.
not every day.
Mhm.
And I hope for most people. So
Mhm.
my hope is that people don't need our stuff all the time, and that they can work on those foundational pieces, the non-negotiables, as you say,
Mhm.
and that they don't need these things as much, only when they actually need the extra support. And blue carnitine is a good example of this, right? So we don't have many people using blue carnitine every day, except if you have a medical condition where you'd be using stimulants every day. Maybe you'd use
Yeah.
this instead. But in general, it's like, let's use it 3 times a week or twice a week when I have like a full day where all my meetings are just, I have no meetings. I'd have to like sit down and write my book or write my copy, or I have 10 Zoom calls in a row or whatever it might be. And I'm just going to just nail it. Right. So, and that's what people would do with buccal. And we get those stories all the time.
Yeah.
And they're so satisfying to me, but I'm like, okay, that's great. But this is not what you should be doing 5 days a week. Probably you should probably
No.
be, you know, you know, going and doing this and then taking some breaks. And so when you mention like taking breaks, I certainly recommend taking breaks from our blue carnitine for sure,
Yeah.
because that typically is good to do maybe 2 or 3 times a week as a way to kind of up and down with the capacity, but also giving yourself a break from the stimulation. And I do find that helpful for most of my patients.
Oh, yeah. I'm always like, okay, does today warrant me using up one of my blue cannatines? Because it's so hard for me to get them here. So I like divvy them out very carefully to myself. So that's another reason why I don't take it
You just got
every
to find us
single
at a
day.
conference here in
Right.
the United
Yeah.
States and come
I
grab
am.
us. And
Next time I'm in the States, I'm going to load up to bring home
yeah,
with
yeah, we
me.
didn't go to the biohacking conference this year, but
No.
we need to go back because I
Yeah.
feel for because I always get the request from people like yourself and others like I'm coming from all these other countries. I can't get
Yes.
what you guys have. And so we actually we actually sell a ton typically when we go because people
Yeah.
are stocking up like you as
Yeah.
they, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
One
because
of
you
our main,
can't find your stuff. Because even just so you guys know, you'll have to go check out Troscriptions. I'm going to link to everything, and I got a coupon code. But uh, your ingredients in your most of your products, there was ingredients in them that I had never heard of, and I actually had to go through them and look them up. Which I've been in this industry for 30 years. Like I know this. I know so all the ingredients. I thought, but I'm like, what the frick is that? And I had to go look it up, and I thought that's so unique. And so you guys have this very unique product with stuff in it. Like I can't find something that's got methylene blue, nicotine, CBD in it. I can't
yeah,
find, and caffeine.
yeah, you won't. Yeah, we're
No.
definitely like we are. So I work with Dr. Ted, who, as I mentioned, and
Yeah.
he is just amazing at creating these combinations. And then it's my job and Boomer Anderson, the CEO of Troscriptions, to find these things or to make them ourselves sometimes and synthesize them because we can't find them. You
Yeah.
mentioned in my bio in the beginning about something called agarin, and agarin
Yes.
is
Should probably didn't say it
it's a
right.
long acting so it's called a long-acting GABA agonist. And what that means is that it works on the GABA receptor in the brain and it lasts for about 6.5 hours. And this really was extremely important and helpful for us when we need to maintain our sleep. So where does agarin come from? It comes from the Amanita muscaria mushroom, everybody. This is the mushroom that has psychedelic properties. So if you've seen Alice in Wonderland, it's the red mushroom with the white little spots on it. Mario
Okay.
Brothers, that's another place. If you've
Yes.
heard of Christmas, everybody's heard of Christmas. The mythology around Christmas is around ingesting this mushroom and having psychedelic experiences. Okay. But this particular compound called agarin is not psychedelic at very low doses, what we're using in this particular formula for Troz for our sleep products. And it works as a long acting GABA agonist. So it maintains your GABA levels, which drop when you go through menopause, for example, if you're
Hmm.
stressed, if you have chronic infection, so many reasons your GABA levels drop. So we had to go to the ends of the earth to find this particular compound. The other compound in it, in the mushroom, is called ibotenic acid, and that is the neurotoxic one in that causes your psychedelic experience. Okay, so that is not in the product. We're just
Okay.
using this long-acting GABA agonist called agarin in there. So we have agarin, we have something called nicotinol GABA, which is another novel one that's a vitamin B3 attached to a GABA, and that's in our Trocom because GABA itself is not that great as a supplement because it doesn't get across the blood-brain
The
barrier
blood-brain
very easily.
barrier.
The,
Yeah.
the, the, the brain barrier is very stingy as to what it allows to go through. And so GABA doesn't typically get across very easily unless you have a leaky brain, which means
Hmm.
you have a leaky barrier, and
Hmm.
also that just means you usually have a leaky gut. So this vitamin B3 though attached allows it to get through very easily, and so you get vitamin B3 and GABA in the brain. So you get the GABA part, which relaxes you, but B3, which increases energy, it's NMN and NAD and things like that. That's going to make you mildly activated, so you don't feel tired. You just feel relaxed, and
Yeah.
that's pretty cool. And
And
so,
brain
anyway,
calm. Like it's like
yes, you're
the brain chatter goes away. So it's not like it knocks you out, but the
right.
brain chatter goes away.
Quiets your mind, right?
Quiet
So,
your mind.
and that quieting of your mind can be really helpful for people that have a hard time falling asleep because their mind is kind of racing and racing. And I always love this statistic. It's crazy that we have about 70,000 thoughts per day on average. Don't believe everything you think, ladies and gentlemen. But
Yeah.
if you're anxious and stressed, that goes up to 120,000 on
Oh
average.
my
So if you
God.
can quiet that down even to your baseline of around 70K, you're doing a good job. So, yeah, I mean, in short, just to give people a sense of what we do, very novel products, very novel ingredients, delivery,
Yeah.
the dosage form, the troche is very novel. And these
Yeah.
all work in conjunction to create, I think, a huge suite of products that can be very helpful for many people in the context, of course, as I always say, looking and doing the non-negotiables as much as possible when we can, but
Always.
sometimes we can't, and these can help too.
Yeah. I mean, we talk about the non-negotiables all the time on here and in my groups and with my patients and clients. And it's like that has to be part of it. I always say your diet, you got to eat well, you got to prioritize protein, you got to exercise, like all of those things, so important, especially for the menopausal midlife woman, even more so because all these things start to become depleted and go down. And you can be really affected by it. So having these things in your toolbox, I think is great. I actually heard about your Trozis from the Biohacker Babes. They came on my show and we were talking about jet lag. And she was saying, you know what? I found this new product that has cured my jet lag. And she said it's called Troche. And I'm like, oh, yes, I've heard of these before I got mine. And I was like, okay, so good to know. And then since then, I now have it, and I've been once again, I divvy it out on just special occasions for myself. But I have a hard time sleeping. I'm a total like crazy person around my sleep. I bit of an insomniac, but anyways, it just I woke up and I was like, "Oh my gosh, that was such a deep sleep." That's what I felt like. I just felt like I went because I'm very, very light sleeper.
Mhm.
And I felt whenever I've taken them, I feel like I go into this really like deep, dark sleep, and it's very nice and uninterrupted, which is so welcomed in my life. So
Yeah, yeah, I
yeah, I
love that.
really
I mean, most
appreciate
people,
it.
no, no problem. Most people drink, like alcohol is a way that people wind down at night. We all know that trashes our sleep.
Hmm.
Marijuana, THC
I
specifically,
take THC.
actually
Yeah.
also, helps people fall asleep. It actually disturbs your sleep stages as
Yeah.
well and your sleep cycle.
I
We
don't get
developed
deep sleep.
Trozy as a way to support all those sleep stages. So helping you feel sleepy, helping you fall asleep, helping you maintain sleep. And if you do wake up in the middle of the night, oftentimes you're sleepy enough to go back to bed because of that agarin in there, that
Oh.
mushroom ingredient that I was just mentioning that helps you maintain those GABA levels throughout your evening so that you don't feel like you're, awake in the middle of the night. You can't go back to bed for many people. So when we think about things, Karen, it's always about this comprehensive understanding of, working with thousands of patients collectively over decades now, myself, Dr. Ted, the other docs on my team, and just understanding like there's a lot of heterogeneity when it comes to uh, or variety when it comes to how people are having a hard time or why people are having a hard time. Like
Mhm.
working on foundational things is really, really important, as we all know. But then some people have a hard time falling asleep because they can't quiet their mind. So Trocom is actually really good for that. You don't need a Troz if you can, like me, if I once I get to bed, I'm good. But sometimes my mind is going so much that it's hard for me to fall asleep. So I use Trocom in those cases, right?
Mhm.
That helps me wind down at the end of the evening, and fantastic, right? And then you have other people that have a hard time maintaining sleep. And so we just have a comprehensive, so, Troz is 8 ingredients in total, actually. So it's a comprehensive, trying to
Yeah.
kind of hit everybody's, buttons or the kind of
Right.
the
Yeah. Yeah.
challenges that
If
they
this
might
isn't going
have.
to work for you, this might.
Exactly. So working on the GABA system, the serotonin
Yeah.
system has a little bit of melatonin in there as well. It has cannabinoids, it has CBN and CBD,
Yeah.
non-psychoactive. So it has all of these things that are working in synergy. And the other thing that we also try to do very much is that we work hard on doing is that we keep things as low dose as possible so that you're not getting overburdened or overrun by one particular ingredient, but it's a low dose that works in synergy with everything else.
Okay. That's, yeah, great. So everybody, you can get 10% off your transcriptions with coupon code hormone. I'm going to link to this in the show notes. And I mean, we could keep going and going, Scott, because you have all these different products, which all have these cool ingredients in them that we could get into. But for next time, we got to save something for the next show,
Sure.
because I've
Sure.
wanted to have you on for so long, just because I've been so into your products, and I only ever support a product that I truly believe in. So I really wanted to share this with my audience. I was talking to my membership group about prescriptions just the other day, last week, and I was telling them, like, because someone was having trouble sleeping, of course, and so I was telling her about the Trozes, and then I was like, and just so you guys know, they've got this amazing methylene blue product. So I was pumping it up with them, and I'm like, I gotta quit talking about this. Like, I should be your spokesperson, I think.
I love it. Well, I mean, your adventures continue, right? In the sense that,
Yes,
it's
yes,
not that easy to get it to Canada, but I'm so happy to hear how powerful it has been for you. I've just
yes.
been so impressed with just the recoveries, the stories, and with anybody from chronic issues for so many years feeling better in like 3 days after taking methylene
Wow.
blue. I mean, of course, that's not the normal, but like people that have just been so sick and like their last ditch effort was using methylene blue and seeing like fantastic benefits. So
Yeah,
I
yeah,
appreciate the time. And yes, there's always a lot to
yes,
talk about, but
yeah,
I hope that what people kind of come away from here is that there's a massive versatility in how to use it. That
yeah,
titration is really the key. That if you're using
yeah,
higher doses, that you should really be working with a practitioner. If
yeah,
you're on SSRIs, also work with a practitioner and go
yeah,
slowly with your dosing. And there
yeah,
is tons of information at the Troscriptions website, on
yeah,
our Instagram, also by the same name at Troscriptions, where we do lots of education. And then if you're a practitioner and if you want more education, we have a full nonprofit that has an educational essential certification and modules to work with your patients and clients on helping to optimize their health.
And you can actually, just so you ladies know, methylene blues can be used on topically. Like I've seen it in an anti-wrinkle cream in a couple places now. And I was like, "Ooh, maybe I need to start adding some methylene blue to my estrogen face cream that I've made." I was like, because it's like because of the antioxidant, I think,
Yeah,
capabilities in it.
it
Yeah.
is. Yeah. I mean, the only challenge is that a lot of these creams are white, and I don't know if it works as well if it's going to be white as opposed to if it's blue. And
No,
there's
they were
something with the chemical
blue.
nature. Oh, they're blue. Okay, good. Good. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Some of
then
the
I
ones
was
I've
like,
seen are
okay,
white. So there's
yeah.
a different chemical structure of methylene blue that can make it look colorless. But I
Ooh,
think that
which
that
then probably doesn't
particular
work.
structure doesn't make it as powerful as the blue would be.
Yeah, and I would think you'd have to be really careful. And yeah, warning to everybody, you got to be very careful about how you handle your methylene blue
Ah, yes.
transcriptions. I made the mistake of cutting it on a cutting board to score it, washed it off, but you could still see these little blue spots. And I thought, well, there's just ingrained in the wood. Well, I made lasagna a few weeks ago. It was so funny. I go shred all this cheese, make my lasagna, and we're eating it. And I thought that the cheese was moldy and I didn't
Oh
know. And I'm
no,
like,
that's hysterical.
oh my God, the cheese is moldy. And then I'm like, oh no, it just
Ju-
soaked up the methylene blue.
I just saw a picture of somebody that was cooking steak on their grill, and their steak was mildly blue for the same reason. Is but so the key here is that if you're going to use a cutting board, make sure it's a very, very dark one or a dark surface. The other way around it is that you can use a paper towel. I have people just use a
Now that's
paper
what I
towel,
do.
cut it on a paper towel. And then if you do get any surfaces, cutting boards are hard because it gets into the wood. But if you get on like a ceramic or granite kind of tabletop, if you have some buffered vitamin C around, like some vitamin C
Mm,
in a powder form, you can
mhm.
scrub the blue with the vitamin C and it will go away. This has saved
Yeah.
me so many times in my house, in my kitchen sink,
Yes.
on the cabinets, and things like that. So
I used like a powdered bleach, actually, like just a little bit with some water and to scrub it off my quartz countertops when I got it on there. Yeah. So
that works too.
it's like it just moves around on its own. I'm like, how? I was so careful this time. And yet I'll
Well,
find
yeah.
it. I found some on my floor once. Like I was
Well,
like,
it's so much worse though, Karen, if people are using drops. So that's why, like, if you get
I
like a
had drops for
dropper
a
from
while. Yeah.
the drops are like notorious, right? Because it's
Yeah.
like this dropper. And then if you get a dropper, you don't actually know how much you're getting in that dropper. And like it's not consistent and
No.
you get it everywhere. But again, it's so much worse with drops. But the buffered vitamin C works really well. So if you have some vitamin
Okay.
C powder, it's natural. You can just scrub the blue with the vitamin C that works. It doesn't work in the mouth though, by the way. The vitamin C doesn't come off, it doesn't help get off mucous membranes like if you use it as a dissolvable lozenge, but it does work on countertops, the laundry. I've done
Yeah.
that too. So
Yeah, exactly. And also, one more thing is that it's really, really great for urinary tract infections. And I've heard so many women in the industry, like friends of mine that are in the industry that
yep,
use your products and use methylene blue, that have said that it's like saved the day for their chronic urinary infections. And that's something that women will get more of as they're aging and going into menopause because of the loss of estrogen again. Women can get chronic UTIs. And so it can be extremely beneficial for that, I find.
yes, and we have a lot of women that do report that overall as a prophylaxis. And also,
Yeah.
there's a very painful condition called interstitial cystitis
Yes,
that
that too.
I do have some practitioners that are using multiple different types of strength, but typically higher strength methylene blue in combination with other therapies and seeing amazing benefits in a very difficult condition overall to treat. So that's
Yeah.
another potential there
Yeah.
too.
Yeah, it's so versatile, like you said. And I'm gonna give it to my dad because he has shingles and it's just not going away. And I just read a great paper in PubMed about how methylene blue helps people with shingles. And I'm like, okay, well, great, another thing.
It's an
So I'm gonna bring
antiviral.
him
Yeah, just
some.
higher
Yeah,
doses. Yeah. Yeah, the higher
yeah.
doses. Yep.
Okay,
Yeah.
awesome. Well, my next smuggle in is going to be the practitioner 50 milligram one and the immune transcription because I want to try
Love
that
it.
because I don't get deep sleep. So I'm going to try that. So thank you, Scott. I'll stop now. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I appreciate it. And I really appreciate your product.
Thanks for having me, Karen. Good to see you.